Hollywood, where dreams sometimes turn to nightmares. Amidst the glitz, alcoholism often eclipses the brightest stars. Here are 20 Hollywood actors who were drunk all the time. Number 20. Gail Russell. It hurts to say this, but Gail Russell is one of Hollywood's most infamous boozers. As a child, she was rather shy and self-conscious. She loved painting, going to movies, and just keeping a low profile. But everything changed when her family moved to California. She was only 14. Legend has it that one day, a high school classmate of Gail's hitched a ride to Balboa, California. During the ride, he spoke highly of her and even claimed she resembled the renowned actress Hedy Lamarr. But here's the crazy twist. The man on the wheels was no ordinary driver. He was William Meiklejohn, a Paramount executive. Interested in meeting the beauty for himself, he wasted no time sending a talent scout to locate Gail and extend an offer for a screen test. But although the introverted Gail wasn't too thrilled, her mother made sure she honored the call. In spite of not having prior acting experience, the test turned out great. In fact, Paramount immediately gave her a contract. She then made her film debut in 1943 in Henry Aldrich's Get Glamour, but with lots of expectations on her poor shoulders. Even after having a couple of movies under her belt, she couldn't handle the baggage of stardom. She lacked confidence and had stage fright and anxiety. Her solution? Alcohol. She started drinking on the set of The Uninvited to ease her spirits, but while that may have worked, she kept on losing herself. She began to drink heavily during scene breaks and always had vodka in her dressing room. Soon, Paramount Studios started loaning Gail to other film studios for a string of unremarkable movies. Word around the grapevine was that Gail was difficult to manage, but that's not even the worst part. In 1953, Gail was arrested for drunk driving. It marked the first of many. 2 years later, she was involved in a hit-and-run accident. She had to admit she had a drinking problem, but it didn't change much. In 1957, she was arrested yet again when she drove her car through a cafe window, hitting the night janitor. And like that wasn't enough, she boldly told the judge she didn't even know how many drinks she had before driving. However, she made a 180-degree turn after the incident. She announced she would be quitting drinking for good, much to the relief of everyone. But alas, even if Gail genuinely wanted to stop drinking, she simply couldn't. In August 1961, she was found dead in her LA apartment, just weeks before her 37th birthday. Empty vodka bottles were found littered around her and throughout the room. More heartbreaks await, though.
Don't be silly, Toto. Scarecrows don't talk.
It's pleasant down that way, too.
Number 19. Judy Garland. Admit it, Judy Garland broke your heart. She never completed more than 65 pages of the memoir, where she intended to share her perspective on the highly publicized challenges she faced from the age of 3, including the cutthroat system at MGM Studios. Had it been completed, it would have taken a defiant stance against her demons and painted the picture of why she became so engrossed in pills and alcohol. Because at the start of her career, she was an absolute peach. She was born at a time when American cinema was buzzing. The public couldn't get enough of Hollywood stars. But if there's one thing that stars do, it has to be to shine. And perhaps none shines brighter than Judy Garland. To date, fans still adore her persona and amazing singing voice. Don't even get us started on her acting. Remember the 1939's The Wizard of Oz? Garland's performance as Dorothy Gale played a big part in the movie, and is still considered one of the greatest films of all time. Alas, Hollywood is never as it seems. Garland was burdened with the weight of her fame on her ascent in Hollywood. Before she turned 30, she was a deep alcoholic and a drug addict. She abused drugs just so she could be slim and keep up with her roles. Plus, she often indulged in unhealthy doses of alcohol and opiates. It was so bad that she even had a bitter fight with the alcoholic Busby Berkeley, with whom she had dated in the past. Sadly, she didn't even live long enough to reap the full rewards of her success. She died at the age of 47. After her body was found, an autopsy was conducted, and the cause of death was a self-overdose of drugs, perhaps accidental. But to be fair, she was already doomed. Evidence of cleared liver damage was discovered. Her drinking problem would have eventually killed her had the drugs not taken her first.
The joys of love, they last but a short time.
Number 18. Montgomery Clift. Renowned as one of Hollywood's first true method actors, Edward Montgomery Clift was actually born with a silver spoon. Born to a successful Wall Street broker, Clift's life was full of privileges. His family often took trips all over Europe, Bermuda, and all kinds of exotic places. For years, he shunned calls to jump to the big screen. It wasn't until 1948 that he finally made the leap in Red River, co-starring with John Wayne. And when The Search, Clift's second film, was released in the same year, he was already at the vanguard. He even had an Academy nomination for Best Actor. But while the world was celebrating the rise of a new star, tragedy came with its ugly head. In May 1957, Clift had a nasty accident when he was returning home from a party. He had veered off the road and struck a telephone pole. Clift was utterly devastated. Even after surgery, he could only be filmed from one side of his face, as the other side was basically immobile. He was down mentally and physically, and alcohol was his only coping mechanism. But we're not saying the accident indirectly made him an alcoholic. No, sir. He was already dealing with alcohol and even prescription drug addiction problems. His newfound depression took things up a notch. It was so bad that even Marilyn Monroe said Clift was the only person she knew who was in worse shape than she was. Was she wrong, though? It's hard to say. In one instance, Clift was picked up by police while walking around Hollywood in a stupor. He was naked and couldn't even recall anything prior to his capture. As the actor's behavior worsened in the 1960s, several of his friends began to distance themselves. Not even Kevin McCarthy stood by him, but they were pretty close before Clift's descent. He wasn't alone, though. Elizabeth Taylor and Marlon Brando remained steadfast. The latter even warned Clift that his addiction to alcohol, depressants, and sedatives were killing him. And that it did. In July 1966, Clift had a coronary artery disease that led to a fatal heart attack. He was only 45 at the time. But what if we told you that Clift's traumatic drinking problems are nothing compared to this next Hollywood boozer?
Merry-go-rounds. No more cotton candy. No more band concerts.
Number 17. Gig Young. Gig Young is the quintessential personification of the saying, there are two sides to every coin. On one hand, he was a handsome, talented, and successful actor, but he was also abusive, self-destructive, and struggling with excessive drinking. Despite starting acting a bit late in his 30s, Young still had a pretty great career. He appeared in hits like Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, Don't They?, and of course, 1948's The Three Musketeers. And then came his big moment. For his portrayal of an alcoholic in 1951's Come Fill the Cup, he received critical acclaim along with James Cagney. But while his on-screen success was pretty obvious in the golden era, his life beyond the silver screen was just as fantastic. Everyone loved him for being the life of the party. But little did we know that there was a darker side to him. We're not just talking about the occasional dose of vodka or liquor. We mean full-blown daily consumption. Alcohol was part of his daily life. And it kept getting worse, to the point where he began losing roles. Ever wondered why director Mel Brooks fired him from the Blazing Saddles comedy? Originally, Young was scheduled to play the wacko kid, but on his first day of shooting, he collapsed on the set due to alcohol withdrawal. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? This wouldn't be the last time. In 1976, Aaron Spelling cast Young as the off-screen Charlie in his new action show, Charlie's Angels. However, Young's alcoholism made it impossible to fill his role, even as a voice actor. He had to be replaced by John Forsythe at his death. But the story gets even darker. You see, Gig Young was married 5 times, with the first lasting 7 years. After his second wife died from cancer, he married Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched, but it didn't last for long. Young's struggles with alcohol and his abusive behavior were too much for her to handle. But guess what? His 4th wife also divorced him for the same problem. His 5th and final wife wasn't as lucky, though. Barely 3 weeks after marrying a German actress less than half his age, Young came home one night, picked up his gun, and fired straight at her head. It was a murder-suicide. He shot himself in the mouth afterwards. But here's the thing, there was no motive. He didn't leave a note. To this day, no one has been able to figure out his motives or why he would do something so diabolical. Could he have been drunk? Why exactly did he do it? It's safe to say that it's one of those Hollywood puzzles that'll never be solved. At least our next drinker wasn't so crazy. Number 16. Lon Chaney Jr. Let's be real, guys. No one could nail horror better than Lon Chaney Jr. He was born for it, literally. Tailoring the approach of his famous father, Jr. knew how to invoke feelings from viewers. This made him the star of scary movies and Hollywood's first cinematic anti-hero during its golden age. But what if we told you that none of it was supposed to be? You see, young Chaney didn't pursue a career in movies until after his father passed away. Despite learning all kinds of tricks from his dad, Chaney Sr. discouraged his son from entering the entertainment industry. Yep, you heard it right. Jr. was the firstborn to silent screen star Lon Chaney, the Lon Chaney, the man who was the melodramatic counterpart to the likes of Gloria Swanson, Rudolph Valentino, and Charlie Chaplin. But back to his son. While Chaney Jr. was well loved by co-workers for his sweet and kind persona, he wasn't so popular with everyone. Critics often delighted to find fresh ways to criticize and demean Chaney's appearance and acting skills. They repeatedly highlighted the irony of casting him as a charming ladies' man and a desirable character, considering his seemingly unconventional appearance. And then came the drinking problem. Apparently, he and Broderick Crawford gained a nasty reputation on the Universal lot as the monsters due to their drunken and aggressive behavior. And no matter how nice you are, it's the sort of thing that gets you in trouble. He got banned from William Randolph Hearst's mansion for trying to get Marion Davies drunk, picked up a lot of heat for allegedly being drunk on a live TV show, and often traded blows with his drunken partner Crawford. He was so deep in the booze that even his first wife Dorothy ended up divorcing him. Much like the Wolfman character he famously portrayed, Lon Chaney Jr. struggled with personal demons that eventually overwhelmed him. His lifelong struggle with alcoholism, coupled with the lack of roles that challenged his acting abilities, undoubtedly worsened his condition. Before his death, he was plagued with a series of health issues, ranging from liver problems to gout, beriberi, and even cataracts, the latter of which he underwent surgery for. He eventually died in 1973 at the age of 67. His death certificate listed the cause of death as cardiac failure due to a standing heart disease, and his oncology issues were directly traced to his overuse of cigarettes and heavy consumption of alcohol.
Was it you who kissed me?
You're talking. You're alive.
Well, of course I'm alive.
Number 15. Ava Gardner. Ah yes, Ava Gardner. Renowned for her hard partying lifestyle, sharp wit, and dazzling acting skills, she became one of the leading stars of the 1950s and 1960s, though most of her films are now sadly forgotten. Once hailed as the most beautiful woman in the world, Gardner could keep up with Hemingway in drinking, steal Frank Sinatra's heart, and maintain close relationships throughout the industry while unapologetically being herself. Even in her 60s, she casually greets guests at the door wearing just a towel. She was as crazy as they come, a textbook eccentric diva. Where or what didn't she drink? Nights out with her were the stuff of legends. Was it the time she peed in the lobby of the Ritz Madrid, or when she poured a martini down a bar owner's trousers? We can't count the number of times she was asked to leave upscale establishments because of her exuberance. In fact, she ended up being banned not only from the Ritz Madrid, but also from the St. Regis in New York. Alcohol removed any inhibitions Ava Gardner may have had, allowing her to fully immerse herself in partying. It fueled her intense relationships, drunken conflicts, and sexual exploitation, all part of a vibrant personality that led her to be one of the most eccentric actors of her time, if not all time. Because don't even get us started on how her alcoholism intersected with her career. During the filming of Night of the Iguana, Gardner refused to film a night scene because she felt like drinking instead. It was so serious that director John Huston had to join her in consuming tequila shots until she was willing. However, at that point, the duo became too intoxicated. She couldn't act, and Huston wasn't effectively directing the scene. Imagine calling it a day just because your lead actress felt like having some booze. Her story took a dark turn. They say that love can be one's greatest undoing. While tumultuous celebrity couples dominate today's headlines, it's easy to assume that A-listers during Hollywood's golden era were more reserved. However, the reality is that the celebrity relationships of yesteryear were just as messy and scandalous as the power couples of today, maybe even more. Sure, there wasn't any social media to record every sin, but even that couldn't stop their scandals from making the tabloids. And when it comes to ironic hot mess couples, no one can come close to Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra. The pair shared many pleasures in life, like jazz and luxury, but nothing came close to their love for alcohol. Gardner herself once boldly declared they drank 3 to 4 big martinis in champagne glasses every night. And then there was wine, bourbon or scotch, They frequented nightclubs to drink away their troubles. But then it happened. Sinatra became violent and usually had manic outbursts, oftentimes towards Gardner. But with her troubles piling up, she went even deeper into alcoholism, pushing her towards the edge. But it was her divorce that saw her tumble. As the years went on, alcohol took away her cherished beauty. She began to withdraw from the public and lived the rest of her life far from the camera lenses. She even stopped taking calls when a stroke left her unable to speak. By the time she died, aged 67, she was a shadow of her youth, a demeaning end to the epitome of beauty and sensuality. But if you're shedding a tear or two today for Gardner, you might want to clean it up now. The next boozer in our story is someone dark.
I don't know, I can't quite figure you out. Well, what are you trying to prove? Why am I here?
Well, Sam, I
After all, a little Normo could have driven you down here. Why did you ask me?
thought you might want to kiss me goodbye.
Number 14, Spencer Tracy. Surprised to see him? We're not surprised. On screen, he was one of Hollywood's good guys, but off screen, it tells a different story. Spencer's journey into acting began during his time as a student at Ripon College in Wisconsin. There, he discovered his talent and dedicated 7 years to the theater before finally making his breakthrough in film at the age of 30. This marked the beginning of a 4-decade career spanning 77 movies. And he was successful. Only Laurence Olivier could match his 9 Oscar nominations for Best Actor. Fans loved everything about him. They thought of him as a dignified man. However, he was anything but that when the cameras weren't rolling. He was violent, drunken, and a predator who never shied away from degrading women. Yeah, you heard right. Even as a middle-aged man, Tracy was still chasing after young women. He even groomed and slept with Garland when she was only a teenager. And to make things worse, his bosses at MGM covered up his shameful behavior. They chose to ignore the fact that he continued his relationship with Garland for the subsequent 3 years, keeping his story away from the tabloids. But while their publicity machine was indeed powerful, even that couldn't hide his alcoholism. And unlike most boozers, Tracy loved binge drinking. Tracy would so often lock himself in the room, strip naked, and get into the bathtub. There he would stay submerged, sometimes for a week, consuming whiskey. It was so bad that he wouldn't leave the tub, even for basic needs. Once his binge subsided after the week, he would tidy himself, dress, gather his suitcase filled with empty bottles, and check out. But guess what? He was a violent man when he was drunk. He'd often have wild outbursts, resulting in numerous bar fights where he typically ended up worse off than his opponents. On one occasion, he woke up in a padded cell in Chicago. Worst of all, according to restaurateur Toots Shore, Tracy was banned from a New York brothel after assaulting one of the prostitutes there. But don't take this to mean alcohol was the reason for his bad behavior. Yes, he was a mean drunk, but his meanness often split into periods of sobriety. He was said to be arrogant and outright cruel to lesser actors and other crew members on the set. Throughout his adult life, Tracy struggled with the aforementioned vices and more. He also smoked cigarettes, took pills, and kept up with his prolonged drinking. These three and the fact that he was overweight led him to poor health in his 60s. Karma? Perhaps. In 1963, Tracy was hospitalized after a wild case of breathlessness. Doctors discovered that he was suffering from pulmonary edema, where fluid accumulates in the lungs due to an inability of the heart to pump properly. But that wasn't all. His blood pressure was dangerously high, and he had to be cared for round the clock. He finally died at the age of 67 from a heart attack. Check out who we have next.
Recall all units, 10-4. Hi, I'm Broderick Crawford. We have different ways of getting and receiving information on highway patrol.
Number 13, Broderick Crawford. Best known for his portrayal of Willie Stark in 1949's All the King's Men, in which he won an Academy Award and a Golden Globe, Broderick Crawford became a household name for his tough guy roles. But while he was a celebrated actor, not a lot of people knew how deeply alcohol consumed him. Throughout his adult years, Crawford frequently indulged in heavy drinking and consumed large meals, leading to significant weight gain for him during the 1950s. But was that enough to stop him? Certainly not. He even doubled down on it. During the film of Highway Patrol, Crawford was arrested multiple times for driving while under the influence of alcohol. He even got a suspended driving license because of it. His alcoholism was so bad that even the show's creator, Guy Daniels, had to ensure all of the dialogues were done by noon. Anything after that would derail the set, as Crawford would be too drunk to get things done. But that wouldn't be the only compromise. The actor began to bribe people to bring him booze on the set, and the directors had to shoot scenes on private roads just so that Crawford could drive. After becoming close friends with Stuart Whitman, who was also featured in Highway Patrol, Crawford took advantage of his financial difficulties to craft a cunning plan. He would enlist Whitman to portray his character whenever he was short on cash so that Whitman would do the dialogue while he was drinking. Nonetheless, here's another fun fact about Crawford. Remember those scenes of Crawford just standing or leaning against walls? Well, it was actually a shooting trick. He was neither standing nor leaning, but rather lying on the floor. He was too drunk to even act straight. The crew had to shoot him from above so that they could just finish the job.
Come for my money.
Number 12, John Wayne. Featuring in over 170 films and TV productions, actor John Wayne has long solidified his status as one of cinema's most legendary stars. His immense popularity with audiences worldwide even got him recognized as one of the greatest male stars of classic American cinema by the American Film Institute. To be fair, it was well-deserved. Throughout his career, he was loved at home and abroad. But here's one secret that most of his fans wouldn't want you to know. Alcohol was his best friend. He was never shy about having a drink. Whether he was on a movie set or enjoying life on his houseboat, alcohol had to be around him. He even claimed that he could never trust a man who doesn't drink. So perhaps that's why he ensures his friends share booze with him. He saw alcohol as an opportunity to create bonds, share laughs, and tell stories. He also associated it with masculinity. Any man who couldn't handle his drink or even indulge in it failed his test of being a real man. Not that he couldn't control himself, though. Like Broderick Crawford, directors had to make compromises to adjust to the star. In his case, studio directors had to shoot scenes before noon because they knew Wayne would have likely gotten himself drunk afterwards. And how about the tea spilt by his own son Ethan? Recalling Wayne's habits when they went cruising on his 136-foot yacht, he claimed that the vessel had to make several pit stops near icebergs just so his dad could sip some bourbon or tequila. For some reason, however, he really didn't enjoy whiskey. Maybe it wasn't manly enough for him. But speaking of alcohol in masculinity, the next boozer on our list challenges Wayne's patriarchal views of alcohol. She is...
Ranger? Oh, Don, I do hope you will. Then everything will be perfect. No talk, no scandal. And then I can slip away quietly.
Number 11, Mary Astor. Mary Astor began her long motion picture career as a teenager in the silent movies of the early 1920s. But when sound pictures became the norm, she was off-screen for a year. Her voice was deemed too masculine. However, it didn't take long for her to get back. Her talent was too irresistible to get shadowed for a trivial reason. Just to buttress this, director Lindsay Anderson, along with a myriad of critics, praised the actress for her innate ability to bring depth and authenticity to her roles, a quality that consistently resonated with audiences. Don't take this to mean her career was a bed of roses, though. In 1936, a major scandal almost crippled her career. She had an affair with George Kaufman, and her former husband ridiculed her name in a custody fight by calling her an adulteress. Overcoming these hurdles in her private life, she went on to greater film success. Remember 1941's The Great Lie? Her portrayal of a concert pianist, Sandra Kovac, saw her win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. But at the same time, her drinking was getting worse. Long before her big break, she had already admitted to being an alcoholic, but it never interfered with any of her performances or even her work schedule. She knew how to balance the two together, a feat that the likes of John Wayne couldn't. He'd have been proud of her, no doubt. Nonetheless, she hit rock bottom in 1949 and everything turned south. She even had to be placed in a sanitarium for alcohol. Did her life get better, though? Absolutely not. 2 years later, she attempted suicide with an overdose of sleeping pills. Worse, that was her second attempt in 2 years. The story broke the headlines. She claimed it had been an accident, but it was hard to believe. Luckily, that served as a wake-up call. She sourced funds from the Motion Picture Relief Fund to help pay her bills and took a bold step to piece her life back together. She converted to Roman Catholicism and began to write about her experiences. Her priest encouraged her to do so as part of therapy. She died much happier in 1987 at the age of 81. She appeared in over 100 movies across 45 years. But just in case you weren't opportune to witness Mary Astor's greatness firsthand, here's a name that should resonate more with you.
Anxious enough as it is, knowing what lies ahead. Then again, we all are.
Number 10, Richard Harris. How Ireland's very own bad boy managed to transform into a fine old wizard in Hogwarts is something that needs a video of its own. Twice divorced and twice bankrupt in his tumultuous life in entertainment, Harris gained notoriety for engaging in physical altercations with individuals ranging from Kirk Douglas to Charleston Heston to random market porters. The man lived life hard and partied even harder. In his early Hollywood years, the Irish actor developed both a cocaine and alcohol addiction. This he spoke quite openly about over the years. Before he landed the role of Dumbledore in the Harry Potter film franchise, Harris was already famous for his wild lifestyle. At one stage, Harris's drinking habits were so extreme that he consumed 2 bottles of vodka along with a mixture of brandy and port every evening. Legend says he only had to walk into P.J. Clark's in New York for the bartender to line up 6 double vodkas. It was his usual at the time. Even while filming Harry Potter, he often went to pubs to drink booze with Alan Rickman and Kenneth Branagh. Sometimes they stayed until 4 o'clock in the morning. How was he featured in the film Hawaii? While filming in the actual city, Harris developed a fondness for the local cocktail, a concoction of rum, Cointreau, and grenadine. This newfound preference led to incidents where he attempted to halt traffic using his fists. Drinking felt fun, but it was killing him, especially with his marriages. Intoxicated, he once threw a wardrobe at his wife. Luckily, she didn't suffer much from it. Harris, though, he wasn't so lucky. He began to have health complications. It was so severe that his doctors warned him that he had only 18 months to live if he didn't stop. And for a while he did, but not without visiting the Jockey Club in Washington to have his final sip, his choice, 2 bottles of Chateau Margaux, 1947. He also stopped using cocaine after a near-fatal overdose. However, in his later years, Harris resumed drinking, but never more than a pint of Guinness before going to bed. Number 9. Peter O'Toole. Older viewers might be able to recall O'Toole's infamous first appearance on American television, The Johnny Carson Show. He had arrived so drunk that he barely lasted a couple of minutes, just enough to break his glasses, cut out, and run away. But his eccentrics matched his success. He had a staggering 18 Academy Award nominations, including performances in hits like Lawrence of Arabia. Early on in his acting career, it was obvious that O'Toole loved his drinks. In fact, he was reportedly intoxicated throughout the entire production of the 1964 classic Beckett. But really, his alcoholism was long before that. By the age of 20, O'Toole was already headlining at the esteemed Bristol Old Vic Theatre. By the age of 26, he had become the star of the Royal Shakespeare Company, England's most esteemed theatrical institution. And boy, did he love to drink. Unlike most boozers, he had no childhood trauma or devastating drama altering the course of his life. He just loved alcohol because it was fun, especially when he shared it with his friends and peers. Speaking of friends, Harris created a group called Alcoholics Unanimous, and as the name implies, it was for like-minded alcoholics who loved sharing it with the company. Together, they fought in pubs, caused chaos in fancy establishments, and even urinated on stage during plays. But perhaps 2 of his most legendary drink stories were when he claimed to have learned about JFK's assassination 22 years after it happened, and secondly, when he suffered a terrifying burn on his index finger without knowing how it even happened. A spotless finger wasn't the only thing he lost to alcohol, though. Booze severely eroded his stomach lining, and by the end of the 70s, his doctor warned him that another drink could be fatal. After undergoing multiple surgeries, he gave up drinking for a decade before picking up another habit, growing marijuana in his garden. Surprisingly, he died in 2013 at the age of 81. By then, he was back to drinking beer again. Coming next, though, is the Tasmanian Devil himself.
In love, I met a certain someone who makes me feel that way. And ever since I met her, I'm a-singing in the saddle. Ski-daddle-doodle-daddle all day.
Number 8. Errol Flynn. Born in Tasmania in 1909, Errol Flynn captivated the world with his charismatic persona and crazy stunts. In no time at all, he became the symbol of fierce masculinity. However, behind the glamour of the silver screen, Flynn's life was a wild dance. The proverbial playboy became famous for his countless scandals with women, and alcohol, of course. Whether it was picking up the habit of drinking odorless vodka on set from Anne Sheridan or wooing Princess Irene of Romania, Flynn pursued his own desires with little concern for the consequences he left behind. The world was his oyster, and he made sure to savor every taste by drinking all over the world. He clinked glasses in Cuba, took booze in Malibu, flew to the Eve Club in London, and had wild fun in New York. On his private boat, he threw wild parties fueled by sex, alcohol, and cocaine. If you looked up eccentric in a dictionary, his name would have come up as the definition. He was once arrested on a drunkenness charge after stealing a cop's badge. From French wines to dark spirits to champagne and fancy establishments, there was nothing Flynn wouldn't drink. He even injected vodka into his oranges when he was banned from drinking on set. And when you consider the fact that he had several bottles of vodka every day, it's easy to see why his liver couldn't keep up. Worse, his heart and lungs had already sustained irreparable damage in his 30s. Sadly, Flynn's extravagant lifestyle eventually led to his demise at the age of 50. He fell victim to a fatal heart attack. At the time of his passing, his once charismatic figure had been overtaken by a bloated and overweight appearance, ravaged by the effects of an unhealthy lifestyle. The medics who performed his autopsy were surprised he even died at his age. It should have been sooner.
So long now, you filled my life. Like a great noise that I hear everywhere in my heart.
Number 7. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was a larger-than-life figure whose legend echoes through the annals of Hollywood. He lived his life with the pedal to the metal and a glass in his hand. Yet, for all his fame and accolades, Burton's love affair with alcohol proved to be his undoing. Raised in the shadow of his father, whose penchant for alcohol was also evident, Burton inherited not only his father's charm, but also his insatiable thirst for alcohol. From the tender age of 12, he danced with the devil of alcohol, often boasting of his ability to down a half a gallon of cognac or a fifth of whiskey in a single night's performance. Remember his appearance in The Klansman? Burton's struggle with balance mirrored his tumultuous relationship with the bottle, culminating in scenes shot from a reclined position. But it makes us wonder, why exactly were Hollywood's classics so engrossed in alcohol? Surely they knew there'd be consequences, right? Off-screen, Burton's recklessness knew no bounds. After hearing the rumor sighting of a shark, he once quaffed an astonishing 21 shots of tequila before diving headlong into the depths of the sea. And while we admit that sounds like something straight from a Hollywood movie, it really happened. But before that, doctors had already warned him that his unquenchable thirst for alcohol would lead to his rapid demise. You see, his kidneys were already swelling. He even had to undergo a surgical procedure to fix that. But that's when doctors discovered his spine was encrusted with crystallized alcohol. Did he change for the better? Certainly not. He died that same year of a cerebral hemorrhage, with his body ravaged by years of excess despite being 56. It was the same disease that claimed the life of his father. Poetic justice? You tell me. But before we go into the sad story of the next actor on our list, make sure you subscribe and smash the post notifications so you'll be the first to know when another mind-boggling video like this gets rolled out. While you're at it, can you guess who we've got next? Here's a hint. He was the proud booze buddy of Richard Burton.
Are you a prize fighter?
No, I'm a shamus.
What's a shaman?
It's a private detective.
You're making fun of me.
Uh-huh.
Number 6. Humphrey Bogart. Yep, you guessed it. Humphrey Bogart is at number 6. Famously hailed as the greatest male actor in the history of American cinema, Mr. Bogart became synonymous with success. Not that they were wrong, though. The man had numerous Academy Award nominations and surreal performances in timeless classics like The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, The African Queen, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. With his filmography, it's easy to see why he became the leading man in Hollywood. Unfortunately, Bogart's personal life had one big flaw. He was a heavy drinker. He took all kinds of stuff, ranging from scotch, black velvets, bathtub gin martinis, beer, and even the occasional Jack Rose cocktail. But I don't even think he remained an angel afterwards. Friends and acquaintances knew all too well the shift that occurred once the drinks began to flow. What started as a jovial evening often descended into a volatile spectacle, with Bogart assuming the role of the enigmatic and brooding figure he portrayed on screen. Gone was the lovable charm, replaced by a volatile concoction of anger, stubbornness, and at times outright aggression. For those unfortunate enough to witness these episodes, the line between reality and fiction blurred, as Bogart's intoxication fueled his descent into a distorted reality where he was a beast. And as his illustrious career progressed, his drinking became worse than ever. His alcoholism was on the verge of threatening everything he was on the verge of achieving as a leading figure in Hollywood. He often arrived on set either intoxicated or suffering from a hangover. He was fighting with everyone. No one liked the new meaning of Bogart. Actress Mary Astor even described him as angry with the world. Soon his love for alcohol and cigars deteriorated his health. In 1956, he was diagnosed with cancer and passed away shortly thereafter. Brace yourself, guys. More heartbreak follows.
What kind of a principle? Living like hunted animals? Everybody in the world against us? Suppose the bomb did drop. Would they try and smother us out then?
Number 5. Barbara Payton. If there's one Hollywood woman we wish had a different story, it has to be Barbara Payton. The blonde bombshell was on her way to becoming the new Marilyn Monroe before she had one big derailment. As a rising B-list actress, she had connections with affluent men like Babs and her husband, Frank Tone. But not even they could save her when her career flipped over due to alcoholism. She eventually lost her beauty and job and even had several troubles with the law. But first, let's talk about where it all began. In the late 1940s, Payton had her big break. She was spotted by William Cagney, brother of Hollywood star James Cagney, who was also in charge of Cagney Productions. He instantly fell in love with her on-screen persona, and all the rest was history. She was selected to be the leading lady in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. Payton couldn't resist the temptations of Hollywood. Even before her big break, she already loved to party. Adding Tinseltown to the mix was always going to be overkill. She slept with powerful men in the industry to take her career further. But while many of her scandalous escapades remained unverified, Payton undeniably built a reputation that raised eyebrows in Hollywood. She had violent relationships and engaged in shoplifting, prostitution, and numerous run-ins with the police. Fast forward to the mid-1950s, and Payton was already abusing both alcohol and heroin. This marked the end of her career. Her last film was 1955's Murder Is My Beat, and a year later, she lost custody of her 9-year-old son. She never saw him again. The culmination of both destroyed her both physically and emotionally. Even when she was offered admission to a detoxification unit, she definitely stated she'd rather drink and die. She should have been more careful with her words. In 1967, she became ill and sought solace from the weight of her spiraling life. This yearning took her back to San Diego, where she lived with her parents. She died there soon after. Her heart and liver had failed at the age of 39. Our next boozer had a similar fall from grace. Number 4. Jan-Michelle Vincent. Good looks, the ladies, money, fame, and a career most can dream of. At the peak of his powers, Jan-Michelle Vincent had it all. But as the theme of this video suggests, he wasn't immune to the flaws of Hollywood. His dance with booze and drugs led him on a path of self-destruction. But before that was his ascent to fame. Thanks to his jock physique and immense charisma, Vincent fit right into the archetype of action dramas. He was the hitman apprentice to Charles Bronson in 1972's The Mechanic, and who could forget his portrayal of a handsome young stuntman in Hooper? But perhaps none of these came close to 1983's The Winds of War. He had everyone glued to him. No one could resist his allure. It didn't take long to become the best-paid actor on American TV, commanding fees over $200,000 an episode. Can you imagine the weight of that in the mid-1980s? Such a sum was simply unheard of. But perhaps it was just too much for him. He fell headfirst into the dark side of fame. By the 1970s, he had already garnered a reputation as a bit of a rebel with a series of arrests for cocaine possession. However, after Errol, he spiraled into full-blown addiction. And despite how producers regularly forgave his antics, it began to affect his work. He became difficult on set, fought at bars, and had several arrests for driving under the influence. His health and personal life deteriorated so badly that his relationship with his then-fiancée fell through. She had accused him of assault. Before that, though, he had a series of car accidents due to alcohol. One time in 1996, he severely injured a female domestic worker in his home who happened to be a passenger on the day. He was charged with DUI after recovering from damage to his vocal cords that left him with a permanent rasp in his voice. But he still didn't change. 4 years later, he violated probation for his prior alcohol-related arrests by appearing drunk in public 3 times and assaulting his fiancée. He finally died at the age of 74 in 2019 due to cardiac arrest. By then, his right leg had been partially amputated amid complications from periphery artery disease, and he also owed $70,000 in back taxes at this point.
I in here last night, and did I spend a $20 bill?
Yeah.
Oh, boy, what a load that is off my...
Number 3. William Claude Dukenfield. Commonly known as W.C. Fields, the next man on our list made waves as a comedian, actor, juggler, and writer. He could do it all. Starting in vaudeville, he gained global recognition as a silent juggler before transitioning into comedy. He then starred in the Ziegfeld Follies and achieved stardom in 1923's Broadway musical comedy Poppy, portraying a vibrant small-time con man. His later roles on stage and screen typically featured similar characters, ranging from scoundrels to everyday men oppressed by their spouses. For much of his career, Field's character often expressed a love for alcohol, fate's way of making a poetic twist. At first, Fields never drank in his early career as a juggler. He knew that alcohol would severely affect his performances. However, the loneliness of constantly traveling saw him fall for the temptations of liquor. Soon he began to drink regularly. By the time he was featured in Paramount Pictures' International House in 1933, he was already famous for his alcoholism. Studio publicists promoted the image, as did Fields himself in press interviews. Alas, the writing was already on the wall at that point. He was deeply alcoholic. But while he seemed to prefer whiskey, gin, and other spirits, he occasionally had beer. In any case, his addiction got so bad that directors had to plead with Fields to take it down a notch, just so they could catch up on their derailed schedules. Sadly, Fields spent the last 22 months of his life at the Los Encinas Sanatorium in California. His health had significantly deteriorated. He died in 1946 at the age of 66. The cause of his death was a massive gastric hemorrhage.
You carry a 00 number. It means you're licensed to kill.
Number 2. Bernard Lee. With 50 years of acting experience and a resume boasting over 100 films and television credits, Lee certainly has a place in Hollywood's Hall of Legendary Fame. At only 6, he had already gained Hollywood experience, dabbling in a couple of stage productions. But if you think it was his most impressive feat, you've got another thing coming. Without a doubt, his portrayal of M, the chief of the British Secret Service in 11 James Bond films, stands out as his most notable accomplishment. Nonetheless, Lee's personal life was marked by sorrow. He was viciously mugged and crippled in debt, and like that wasn't enough, he also lost his wife in a tragic house fire. The culmination of these sank him into depression. Alcohol was his only coping mechanism. But sadly, he ended up being addicted. In fact, it was so bad that he often locked himself in his dressing room during breaks. Even when the directors took strict measures against his habits, Lee found a way to break them. He had this novel idea to hire a person to feed a straw through the keyhole, allowing him to enjoy his favorite companion, albeit discreetly. But before we forget, remember when we talked about Richard Burton's drinking story? Yeah, it turned out that he was even no match for Bernard Lee. They supposedly had a competition to determine who had the highest capacity for alcohol, and Lee floored him. It's crazy what some of our heroes did in their spare time, isn't it? Sadly, though, Lee's health deteriorated just like his rival. He died of stomach cancer at the age of 73, which was widely believed to be a result of his excessive alcohol intake. But you wouldn't guess who's number 1, not in a million years.
She looks at you like you was dirt about a 30th.
You needed hotter to cleanse your sin.
Number 1. Oliver Reed. In the history of Hollywood's greatest drinkers, there's a special place reserved for Oliver Reed. Can you blame him, though? He was one of a kind. His skills as an actor and a ladies' man could only be matched by his love for booze, the latter of which sometimes eclipsed the former. For all of his strengths, he was complicated to say the least. He loved alcohol so much that he once declared he didn't live in the world of sobriety. Born in southwest London in 1938, Reed's father was a successful sports journalist. His family was wealthy, and he grew up as a child of privilege, a true aristocrat, if you may. He went to good schools and was groomed with good manners. Even when World War II was picking up heat, his family lived comfortably in the safety of their countryside home, while others were forced into shelters. But while one would think the soft life would make him weak, it turned out to be the opposite. He grew fast and huge and was stronger, bigger, and faster than his peers. No one dared to bully him. When the time came to switch to acting, he aced every obstacle. Despite having dyslexia, he wasn't able to learn not only his lines but also those of others. But perhaps this ease became his undoing. He often sacrificed shooting time for alcohol. Reed relished the challenge of outdrinking anyone and never shied away from it. He even created a concoction he dubbed gunk, consisting of a mix of every drink available in the bar where he was at. Quite an interesting beverage, to say the least. He famously consumed 126 pints within a 24-hour period and marked this extraordinary feat by executing a horizontal handstand atop the bar. But while his drinking never impacted his work at first, alcohol eventually took its toll. At first, Reed lost a role in a Steve McQueen film after vomiting on the American actor during a legendary pub crawl at a nightclub. In one evening, he and some friends reportedly drank 60 gallons of beer, 32 bottles of scotch, 17 bottles of gin, 4 crates of wine, and a bottle of baby cham. And like that wasn't crazy enough, Reed claimed he also drank 106 pints of beer on a 2-day marathon binge before walking Josephine Burge down the aisle. Fast forward to 1987, and Reed became severely overweight. He also suffered from gout and had severe kidney issues that practically forced him into sobriety. It didn't last, though. After a year, he picked up alcohol again, this time with a fiery vengeance. He became a total maniac. It was awful to see. While filming Rennie Harlan's Cutthroat Island in 1995, Reed was cast in a cameo role as Mordecai Fingers. However, he arrived on set heavily intoxicated, having been involved in a bar fight earlier. Then he attempted to expose himself to lead actress Geena Davis, resulting in his dismissal from the film. He was replaced by British character actor George Murcell. Reed featured in a couple of uneventful films in the 1990s before Ridley Scott gave him a leading role in Gladiator. He maintained sobriety while filming in Malta in 1999 until an unfortunate encounter that would kill him. Reed always said that the best class of people you'd meet were in pubs, but on this occasion, he met a group of Royal Navy cadets who challenged him to a drinking and arm wrestling competition. He hadn't even completed his drink when he suddenly collapsed. Everyone tried to resuscitate him, but to no avail. He died in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. He was 61 at the time. That completes our walk through Hollywood's most notorious boozers, who were drunk all the time. If you enjoyed it, make sure to smash that like and watch the current video displayed on your screen. It's going to blow your mind.